I'm William Shatner. I've done a lot of things in my career, but this takes the cake. This is so cool. You, Joseph, today, it's all about you. You won the internet. Congratulations. It's exciting. It makes me want to celebrate. Makes me want to get up out of this chair. Makes me want to sing. Makes me want to dance. Makes me want to shout. Kick my heels up. Throw my hands up. Toss my head back. No, really, people should be shouting your name in the street.
Come on now. Sing
that song.
Joseph,
Sing it out loud.
Joseph.
I want to celebrate. Put it up in lights.
The internet belongs to you.
See, no one else deserves to be celebrated like you because you are the best.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is CeeLo Green, and you are now tuned in to Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He is not famous at all. Check out this new streaming show. It is perfect. And if you don't, fuck you.
Man, let me tell you, there is a lot going on today. There is a lot going on today. This is a big episode. This is a big day. Why is it a big day? Well, besides my raspy, sexy voice, more on that later, this is a live show. And in a live show, to prove we're live, Croatia just stunned the Brazilians. If you were time shifting or on demand watching, it's too bad. Croatia are through to the semifinals. Brazil are going home on a jet plane. Thanks for playing. And I guess Messi's inevitable lifting of the trophy is just one step away, one closer step away, one step closer away. You know what I mean? I don't know what I mean. But listen, Crypto Block Party, you wanted to be the first. You are the first. Let's go feed the pigs, Kevin. Here early so I can have first comment and like. LFG FTP, baby, you are the first. And Z says, LFG, why not? I'm excited because today we have Kevin DeGods himself, CEO, founder of Dust Labs, and just one of the most popular collections, NFT projects, communities in the entire Webosphere, Web3 sphere. Cut the reverb. I'm super excited. We're going to talk about DeGods. We're going to talk about Utes. We're going to talk about Dust. We're going to talk about Dust Labs. We're going to talk about doxing. We're going to talk about what message we can send out to the brands out there, to the big brands, the brand bullies looking to come into the space, looking to figure out, are we too early? Are we too late? Or is this what I like to call the Goldilocks approach? Not too hot, not too cold, not too late, not too early, but just right. Well, more on that soon. Now, I want to talk about, it was a crazy last couple of weeks. I'm not going to lie. I had Ryan Carson on my show. In fact, you know what? Let me play you a clip from Ryan Carson on the show. Ryan, COO of Proof Collective, one of the founders of Moonbirds, and now, of course, the host of Daily Dose. This was one of the highlights from the show. And today, with Kevin on the show, no doubt I'm going to produce a plethora. Who doesn't love the word plethora? Jefe, would you say I have a plethora of clips? Yes, Jefe. Yeah, sorry. Yes, El Guapo. You have a plethora. Unfortunately for me, I'm so high on Robitussin right now and Paxlovid. More on that soon. Hey, let's just play Ryan Carson. You've created camaraderie. You've created collaboration, this reciprocity, which I actually think will power community capitalism. And that's what will clean up Times Square. For the most part, we are still operating in 3-card Monte, hookers and pimps, and we're still in you're still going to get held up at gunpoint in 1990 or 1995. And I'm certainly not saying we need to create the M&M store and the Disney store, but we do need to find somewhere in the middle.
Yep. And I've seen enough technology that's inevitable right? And when it's inevitable, nobody can stop it. And so, I mean, I'm betting my whole career on this, right? You know, I'm placing all my chips on Web3, and I've never been more sure about anything.
I love the idea of technology that is inevitable and cleaning up Times Square. And again, when Kevin comes on the show, I want to ask him about his perspective. How clean does Times Square need to be? Or can we find a happy medium between the friendly Disney and M&M store and perhaps what the perception of Web3 is today? That may not be the reality. Now, when Ryan came on the show, his daily doses really just went bonkers, to use the Ryan Carson quote. And we ended up completely minting out the entry-level pass. At the moment, it is sitting, because we haven't actually launched Alpha Collective yet, at 0.0043. And I said that if we did mint out, and we ended up minting just under 700 of these mints in under 45 minutes, that I would give away a full membership pass, which we're selling at $2,500 fiat, or for a limited time, 1 ETH. On alphacollective.xyz, I said that I would give away a full membership pass. And so we're going to do that draw right now. I better do it quickly, because let me tell you, this thing is slowing down my computer big time. So apparently the wheel of names is spinning right now. You're seeing it live, and you can also buy a Dyson vacuum cleaner. And that, my friends, is the winner. And I'm going to go ahead and an airdrop in your wallet. It is not spam, do not worry. But I'm going to go ahead and airdrop that full membership pass. So now I can go ahead and actually delete that damn wheel of names, and hopefully it will speed up my computer just a little bit more. Now, another thing that happened to me this week, it's been, as I said, a crazy, crazy week. I tested positive for COVID again. In fact, I tested so positive that it turns out I'm having twins. The test line was double red. So I don't know what the hell this means. I guess I'm having two pigs, twin pigs, maybe. Twin Peaks, twin pigs, whatever. So this is me getting over COVID with this kind of crazy, raspy voice. And you know what? The show still went on. We were in the Collective Cafe. We do every single Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 a.m. We do 1 hour of manifestation, of open mic, of AMA. We do a whole bunch of things in the Collective Cafe. I invite you to come and join us Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is free, and there is absolutely no upsell or cross-sell. But today, actually, this which is Friday, December 9th, we actually discussed, I teach at NYU, and last night my students presented comms plan, or crisis communication plans for, Spotify, for Peloton, but also one group dealt with Yay. And it was just interesting to me, as we think about the world that we live in, we think about second chances. We think about, in this SBF and FTX, and we wonder, is anyone at a point of no return where they can never come back? Maybe the answer is yes, or maybe the answer is no. But I do believe that it's really important that we consider the fact that human beings are human beings. They are flawed. They make mistakes. Today in the Web3 world, somebody makes a mistake. Maybe they don't communicate early enough. Maybe they aren't transparent enough. And of course, they get labeled as rugs. It's just amazing to think about how our space ultimately is going to evolve. But we're going to talk about the evolution of the space shortly. And before I bring on Kevin, it's time for our seated soliloquy, which is a monologue. And it's a monologue that I normally do in reference or in homage to my guest. And so today, it's just called ID Please. Now, as many of you know, Frank DeGods and Kevin DeGods are no more gods. Turns out that they're actually mortals like us, of flesh and blood and bones. They're humans, which must mean if we prick them, do they not bleed? Apparently they do. I will not expect him to show us blood today. But in this world of doxing and being doxed and undoxing, I think there's something that still speaks and rings a lot truer. And that is trust. Trust and verify. Identity. How do we establish identity? Is it this? Is it these squeezable cheeks and trophy ears because they're so big? Is it the manifestation of a body, or is it a heart, and is it a soul? Is it a voice? The one thing about the voice of Dust, the voice of Dust Labs, the voice of DeGods, is that it was a consistent voice. It was a voice that built a relationship, that built trust over time. And so look, the five senses are better than 4, and 4 senses are better than 3, and 3 senses are better than 2, and so on and so forth. If you can see me, if you can touch me, if you can hear me, if you can smell me, hell, if you can even taste me, I wouldn't. You'll probably get into trouble. And this is not the talk track to the Who's Tommy. But at the end of the day, when we give people more opportunities to trust us, to build a relationship with us, to connect with us, to buy from us, whether we call that e-commerce, m-commerce, s-commerce, hell, I don't know, Web3 commerce, when we give people more choice, more options, we give them more opportunities to come in a little bit closer, to buy into our vision, our mission, to join us on our journey, to help us fulfill our roadmap, and to move forward together. And if all else fails, hey, just go to AI avatars as well. Because remember, an avatar, a deep fake of video, that doesn't necessarily mean that what you see is what you get. In this day and age of AI copy, etc., I don't know about you, but for me, it comes down to the power of voice. Voice and voice plus, not voice instead of. So now it's time to bring on Kevin. I don't know if I'm allowed to call him Kevin Henrikson, although I might have just done that, but hell, that's what Wikipedia says. Kevin Henrikson is a San Francisco-based engineer, speaker, and investor. He's worked for or headed several companies such as Zimbra, Alpha Brand Media, and Accompli. Henrikson earned his Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, in 2000. Now, here's an interesting little thread. Zimbra was acquired by Yahoo in 2007 for $350 million, which later sold to VMware. Accompli was acquired 18 months later by Microsoft for $200 million in 2014 and is now Outlook Mobile. Henrikson joined Instacart in 2018 as their VP of engineering. I don't know about you, I'm just going to play behind this guy. Wherever he goes, acquisitions flow. He's also an angel investor, including having helped raise over $1.1 million for the Ministry of Supply. Henrikson has served as a speaker for various technology-related conferences, and he is the CEO of Dust Labs. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Awesome, Joseph. Thanks for the great introduction. Happy to be here.
I am happy to have you here. And, normally what I do is when I bring on, I do two things when I bring on NFT founders and collections. The first thing is I just kind of play with the whole doxing a little bit. And I say, Kevin, welcome to the show. What, did you think you were actually going to talk to a human being? No, you were going to talk to, what is he, a monkey?
Yeah, it's like kind of like a Yeti, it's just a Ute. It's a Ute. I mean, by definition, it's a Ute. I mean, that's what it is. I think it's inspired by the Yeti. I think when we came up with Utes, which was our second collections after DeGods, we talked a lot about like having that sort of Sesame Street vibes. It's a lot friendlier, no cigarettes, no knives in the head, nothing crazy. And so for us, that was a big, one of the big design goals around with, just making it more inclusive and sort of accessible to just more, different tastes. And obviously I always want to make great art, but wanted to make it a bit more neutral, where the first collection, DeGods, had a pretty narrow and very specific niche in mind that would not have potentially been open to, all types. And we felt that the youth sort of like expanded upon that.
All right. So we're going to get into the whole Web 3 space for a moment, but you know, I sent you a Google Doc, and your response to me was like you're making me work for this appearance, and I was like, don't worry about it. I just need to know one fun fact or a couple of fun facts. And so it turns out that this man is, I don't know if we can call you a pig farmer, but certainly you grew up on a pig farm. We actually have this image of you deep into the pigs, and no doubt, it was a huge part of your coming out party. So tell us, first of all, what it was like to grow up on a pig farm.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I think I definitely would say it's pretty cool today. I definitely didn't think that when we were kids. So yeah, we moved to the farm when I was in first grade, and started with literally three little pigs, and scaled that over the next, I don't know, 12, 15 years until I graduated high school. And my two brothers and a sister also did. We had several hundred sows, which generally means many hundreds of pigs. Because if you have 200 moms that look sort of like that, that's like a light fake, not a deep fake, but I love it. But yeah, the pigs look like that. We had big pens and, you know, huge barn, 180-foot hog barn, with about 250 sows. So that's mother pigs. And then each of those would have babies. And so across that, you would, you know, depending on when it was, you know, piglet season or not, we'd have anywhere from 300 to 500 pigs in the building. And yeah, it was a ton of work. Every morning and every night, the pigs had to be fed. And it became a little bit of a meme around us when I just described that, like, when good and bad things happen, it was this sort of constant drumbeat in my life, and a really big part of my childhood and my family's childhood, or, you know, kind of growing up in our early years, to just sort of have that thing that happened. And we had a really big fire one night that burned across a bunch of the farms in the area. And it was like, yep, great, go feed the pigs. Got news, our dog died, got hit by a car. Yep, go feed the pigs. Hey, woke up one morning, power's out, there's no water, which means you got to carry water a couple hundred feet from the well where we manually could pump it back to the back. Got to feed the pigs. Like, it didn't matter what happened. We always had this sort of like cutting sort of reminder from my father, who was a Navy pilot. And so definitely didn't mince words. It was like, yeah, go feed the pigs. And like, for us, that was a kind of a cool thing to send a center on. And I always think about this in business life when we've had challenges. I read a lot of Stoic stuff, but I always think back to this thing of like, hey, something happened in business, unexpected, your work or what you're doing or the team, you still got to do your job. And feed the pigs was just a really simple way to sort of help me sort of explain that culture to some of my early startup teams. And we use it here in DeGods now that I've sort of written a thread about it, you know, describing my sort of experience.
I absolutely love this idea. Like, you know, get back to work, put your head down. You know, I always say to my kids, who sometimes act like pigs, hopefully they're not watching right now, but I always say to them, you know, if you're not going to worry about it in 5 years' time, don't waste more than the next 5 minutes worrying about it now. And so now I'm just going to say to them, go feed the pigs. You know?
Yeah, no, it's just an interesting thing, right? Because it's like the pigs don't care, right? And in a sense, they just want to be fed, and it's your job as the caretaker and a pig farmer to feed them. And you just got to do your job, right? And it's not when somebody says do your job, clean your room, do your work, it sounds a little bit more pointed. When it's like feed the pigs, it's like, man, they can't. That's just what has to happen, and there's not a debate, right? It's not negotiable. And I think to me that it's sort of beautiful in its simplicity, but also pretty powerful in the sense that like it is a real responsibility that we, you know, as team members of a team or part of a community or whatever it is, there's always like, what is that next best action and what were you going to do before you got distracted or disrupted? And it's important to just keep that in mind and really focus on that.
I absolutely love it, and we're gonna talk about your doxing or your coming out in a moment. But I saw a comment earlier, and they just said, "Can you talk to me about your project real quick? Membership to what?" So I'm just going to say this very, very briefly. First of all, Kevin, you know, my Alpha Collective is my child now. It is my little piglet. And the goal is actually to usher in the next billion wallets and the next $1 billion into our space. You know, it is my belief that if we want to clean up Times Square, we're going to need to bring in the big brands and their big dollars. We're going to need brand collabs and sponsorships to get beyond, you know, this scraping of the bottom of the barrel. So I wanted to put you on the spot, and I wanted to ask you a question. last week I put Ryan on the spot, and I wanted to ask you, would you agree to be an Alpha Talk speaker and deliver a keynote to our members in 2023?
Yeah, I'm all for it. I'd love to. Yeah, I appreciate the invite.
No, I appreciate it as well. And the second thing is what I wanted to do is offer something to your community, which is, it's just a little bit of fun, that if your community sweep the floor, there are about 19 of these entry-level passes that are on the floor. Right now, they're probably about $3 or $4. But if the floor gets swept and the floor moves up to about, I guess it would be about 0.1 ETH, I will likewise give away a full membership pass to your community as my thanks for actually supporting me like I'm supporting you. So I just wanted to share that with people. And if they want to know where to go, I can put the link as well. So I appreciate
like,
the
it looks like it's on
opportunity.
OpenSea, so you got a lot of Solana folks, but I think, I'm sure they have MetaMask wallets. I know a lot of us came from ETH, or ETH was sort of where we started when we got into NFTs. And so, yeah, there you go. I like it. Awesome.
And that's the link as well. So we'll see if the floor gets swept. I'll be able to share that a little bit later, but just something we can do as well. So now, comment came in and it said, when shui, what does that mean?
So shui is this thing where you basically pour a beverage, generally an alcoholic beverage, into your shoe, and then you drink it. And it sounds gross at first, and it's amazingly viral for two reasons. Look, one is that people have two visceral actions. Like, one, it's like, that's the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and they retweet it. Or one is, that's the grossest thing I've ever seen, and they retweet it, right? And so you end up creating these pretty viral moments. And it started early in our DeGods community as a celebratory sort of thing of like, wow, let's celebrate, and not just cheers, but sort of drink out of a shoe. And now it's became sort of a meme, but also part of the culture inside of the DeGods and Utes community. And so I did my first shui on camera actually last week in Miami at Art Basel during our DeGods and Utes party, which was pretty fired up. So Frank and I actually drank out of the same shoe, amazingly. And then we signed the shoe afterwards, and we actually are, I think the place that we hosted at Solana Space is giving the shoe away or doing a raffle, which will be pretty exciting to see like where the shoe ends up next. But yeah, shui was this kind of cool thing. When I first saw it, I was like, man, this is crazy. But now it's become like pretty cool, like in the sense I need to practice, I need to get better at it. But there is this sort of notion of a way of connecting the community that, like I said, some people are purely disgusted by it, and that, ends up generating lots of engagement on Twitter. And then there's, people that think it's the most amazing thing, which also we've done like team ones where everybody logs into a Zoom and you got like 40, 50, 100 people all doing shoes at the same time. So it's part of the DeGods culture, I would say, at this point.
I'm going to make sure, by the way, that when Alpha Collective mints out, that I do a shui.
There you go. I think that's a good idea. I think it's worked for us across, many of our all-time highs and many of our, sort of like big events throughout the sort of history of the DeGods and Utes project. And so I think it's a fitting way to sort of appropriately use the celebratory shoe.
All right. Now, I also have to make a little bit of a mea culpa. This is the first. I've done about 420 of these interviews.
Wow.
I've had multiple NFT founders on, but it's the first time that I haven't been able to mint one of their NFTs live, simply because I can't afford it right now and do not have the liquidity. But I am also making a pledge that when mint out and when shui, I will also make sure that I buy into the collection. And I will be a proud holder for it will be a soul-bound NFT as far as I'm concerned.
I love it. Yeah, you'll stake and get your Utes points or DeGod points or D points and go for it. Yeah, no, cool. I appreciate that.
Peter Q says, let's go as well. And Good Cancer Guy, is there a Good Cancer? Good Cancer Guy says, found this link on CT. Let's see what happens. Well, we hope however it has touched you in your life, that you have been able to overcome it and power through, and we support you as well, Good Cancer Guy. Now, in about 4 minutes, I'm going to attempt to do my very first POAP. What could go wrong? I have absolutely no idea. Go to poap.xyz And there is going to be a secret code that you're going to need between 1:30 and 1:35. I have no idea what the code is going to be. I have absolutely no idea, but it's probably going to be connected to my guest, and it has nothing to do with feeding those pigs. But Frank, Kevin, let's talk about this experience. You and Frank, right? Frank DeGods, Kevin DeGods. You're both anonymous. You're both avatars. Your only connection to the world is voice. Tell us about the whole experience. Tell us about your life, your personal life before, and maybe let's go back, not even to your Web 2 days, but actually this idea that, I mean, you've created a company and the #1 collection on Solana. That's unbelievable. That's incredible. So let's go back to your origin story, and please tell it, and take as long as you need to tell it.
Yeah, so cool. I mean, yeah, I've been doing software, it's like you mentioned, went to UCLA, been doing software for like 22 years in the Valley, mostly email companies. Most recent sort of email one or notable one was we built a company called Accompli, sold it to Microsoft. It became Outlook. Then went to Instacart and worked on Instacart throughout the sort of process of watching them scale through the pandemic and hiring lots of shoppers and delivering a gajillion, I mean, literally millions and millions of bags of groceries over the past 4 or 5 years. And then met Frank during that process. When I was working at Instacart, I was investing, as you mentioned. I've done a lot of angel investments. And the interesting thing there was, like, I was just always finding interesting ways to meet founders and meet teams. And for me, growing big engineering teams, was always looking for like sort of up and coming talent. And what I found is that angel investing allowed me to meet with founders that had that entrepreneurial spirit. And more importantly, is if they struggled or ended up, selling their company or whatever, ended up becoming really, great sort of, people to go after and hire or want to work with in the future. And so I met Frank at a networking event for UCLA, alumni. We were looking to invest. He was starting a company with his friends, and kind of was mentoring them. They got into YC, raised several $1 million, and sort of went off and running. And as COVID hit for them, Instacart took off, and their business sort of stuttered a little bit because it was a student-focused business. Kids went home from school. So Frank and one of the other founders kind of left and decided to kind of really get into NFTs. And so I was sort of, had been around crypto and seen crypto and just been an enthusiast for a very long time. But as they started to do NFTs, started watching and mentoring, and again, more of an advisor sort of role, wasn't really actively involved in the early stages. But, it was pretty amazing, right? To watch this grow and watch that struggle of like what it took to really build a community and forage like the right connections and things like that. And as that process evolved, Frank kept saying, "Hey, come work with us, come work with me, come work with me." And I was like, "Man, I've got my big job. I'm running, this company and working on, this other big project." And it finally became clear this summer that what we were doing with DeGods and what Utes was doing was really something special. And that, we'd have the opportunity to sort of like expand that. And Dust Labs was the idea which was, hey, we can take the software and the engineering that we've been building for DeGods and Utes and spin that into a separate software company that then becomes sort of venture backed, and can not only build software for NFT projects like the DeGods and Utes community, but more importantly, build for other Web3 founders. And then, really the large vision there is to take the software and the applications we build out to, all of the brands in the world, right? And so we think about that from, musicians, from artists, from just big product brands, right? To really build what we found was a pretty successful track of building this community around DeGods and Utes. How can we take the software and what Web3 enables to allow, these fans to participate in the community? They're not just like, hey, I buy your music or I buy your album. It's like, no, they're sort of owners, that they have a piece and they have this sort of creator economy connection into what we're doing. And it builds this really strong bond, and it's a mutual sort of respect between the holders of the NFT project, the community, and then the sort of fans around that, right? And so a fan now can be somebody, like we have merch for sale, right? You can go to merch, .degods or merch.utes.com, and then you can basically buy, merch. You're like, obviously in the early days that was very holder focused. Now we see purchases from all over the world, or people that are just excited about that, right? 2 weeks ago, we had our team offsite, kind of like on-site, whatever you want to call in LA. And we dropped a pin and said, hey, we're going to be out on the beach tomorrow night for our team meeting. Who wants to come, kind of thing. And, hundreds of people showed up, right? With, essentially less than 1 day notice on a Wednesday night in LA, right? And when we think about that kind of engagement from a community and that kind of connection with holders, it becomes pretty incredible, right? And what we found is that the software that we're building really can enable this sort of deep relationship between a product and a community and sort of owners in something that you're doing. And we think that sort of magical thing that we've found and our DeGod and Utes holders have seen in the early days, moving that out to a broader sort of product or to a broader, sort of industry, it could be pretty powerful, right? And it's not just the hey, you can buy a music ticket and now that can be traded on as an NFT, or hey, you can buy art or an album and that can be traded as NFT. It's really that connection back to the community, right? It's the events that you host. It's the products that are spun off that. I mean, over 40 project founders have spun out of the DeGods community. And you see this incredible support, right? A project founder moves out, does a new project, they get the support of the community, and it becomes this really cohesive ecosystem of projects around that. And so, my story there is really just to be helpful there. I think I am the CEO of the software company, but the software we build is really enabling something much bigger. And that's quite frankly what I'm, super excited about. And I think, as we heard from the clip with Ryan earlier that you played, really think of this as a transition and a huge shift in technology that's going to take decades to play out. And I'm excited to be a part of that. Going back, when I used to walk down Main Street 20 years ago, none of those businesses used cell phones or internet in their business. Today, all businesses use cell phones and internet. Go back 10 years, no business used social media in their business. Today, all businesses use social media in their business some way, even if they're not intending to. People come into their store and do a review, take a picture, share it online. Our view is that 10 years from now, every business will use Web3 in their business. And whether that is for payments, whether it's for inventory, whether it's for customer service or community building or marketing, there will be an aspect of a decentralized model that will be helpful for them.
Kevin, what about next year? What about this time next year? I mean, this time last year, it started getting a little bit chilly outside. And we kept on hearing those crazy Chicken Littles running around saying winter is coming. And apparently it came and it stuck around for a while. Where do you think we'll be this time next year?
I got to mint my POAP. So it's minting, feed the pigs. No, is it a keyword one? It didn't load for me, but I'll try it in a second. So I think this time it's interesting, right? Because if you think about, the DeGods NFT is 13 months old, 14 months old, right? So a year from now is doubling the life of DeGods. And so if we can imagine what DeGods has done in this first year, what we're doing next, with DeGods in particular, we're calling season 3 because season 1 was sort of the initial DeGods. Season 2 was sort of Dead Gods and bringing out Utes. Season 3 is what we're working on now. And so Dust Labs is building a bunch of software for that. Two really big aspects, I think, sort of as I opened with, community is a really big part of that. And for us, building things that enable our community to better connect in real life. Because we think we spend so much time on these screens now, especially post-COVID. That is important for us to get back to going to events and going to finding these human sort of real connections outside of screens and outside of the digital connection that we've been sort of, forced to stick with during COVID and been, sort of more addicted to, quite honestly, since that happened. And so for us, we're looking at, doing more global events, making it easy for the community to spin up their own events, sort of think about this virtual club laid out. And then what we're going to do is experiment with an on premise. We're going to get real estate we've been describing it as sort of like the Soho of Web3, Soho House. And the idea is hey, can we build a hacker house, sort of Soho House vibes where people could come any time of the day, it's open 24/7, to hang out with like-minded folks that can, again, build connections and build community. And I think those are sort of two of the big things on the DeGods side. And we think the software that Dust Labs is building is going to help enable that, and then allow that to happen for other communities, whether those are brands or other Web3 sort of founders or communities.
I'm going to ask you in a moment to talk a little bit more about some of the work you're doing. But before that, I want to try and reframe and unpack what you said.
Yeah.
And I want to try and do that in terms that a normie, or let's say a chief marketing officer, and by the way, if you are a chief marketing officer, normie is a term of endearment, just like degen is as well. And so what you're saying is, not only is this not just a fancy JPEG that you can right click and download, not only is it a fancy JPEG that you can right click and download with a smart contract behind it, but now let's go deeper and let's talk about it as a membership pass, as an entry into a community that can sustain, a community that can self-sustain, and ultimately be able to create generational wealth in the form of, as you say, creating other founders and funding. That this isn't just about floors and flipping, but it is really about creating relationships over time.
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. It's definitely about community. And I think for us, it's that passionate community, right? And I think the difference between like, you know, buying a product or being a member of a community in a very passive way, and then feeling like very connected and supportive in a very active way. And I think, you know, when people look at the NFT stuff and they say, oh, you know, like, is it a, you know, are they flipping them or buying them, or, you know, the early versions of that? Sure. There's definitely, you know, people that are in there for traders and coming at it from a very purely economic value. But I think the ones that stay, right, the ones that have been with us from good, from bad, have been really part of this community, have found something more valuable than just the floor price, or more valuable than the NFT. It's really the connections they make. And I'm sure, like, you know, as you know, kickstart your community, that's what you're hoping to build, right? You're not saying, hey, it's just amount of people jumping in there and buying these things. It's like, no, are we building something that the connections that people make are greater than when they left? You know, when they get there, they say, that I leave with something that's going to continue to carry on. Like that's I think the real sort of essence of what we're trying to build. And the idea of leveraging Web3, leveraging the, you know, the decentralized nature of the blockchain, leveraging the fact that you can be an owner, even a fractional owner, and allow you to have liquidity. So if you want to be an owner and I want to be a bigger owner, I can buy more. If I want to scale down my ownership, I can, you know, buy less, or I can sell some. Like, that's not easy today, right? Like, you have the stock market for companies where you can buy shares and things of that nature. But I think the idea of, you know, you can't buy like my attendance to this event. Like, if we said, hey, how many videos are you going to do over the next year? Like, this POAP's a great example, right? And I think Ryan is like the king or master of these POAPs. He sort of launches these in his show, and people attend and are building value from the attendance, but they're able to sort of represent that online of saying, look, I've actually been to 10, 15, 20, 50 shows over time. And Ryan can go back and say, well, I don't want to just do a raffle or reward people. I want to reward people that have reached certain goals in my community, right? And I think similar, you know, for companies out there, we've seen this notion of like, scan a badge, or, you know, punch a ticket on my Subway card, and, you know, after 10, I get a free a free sandwich. But like, you know, there's no way for Subway to reach out to those card holders and be like, hey, who's got who's done 4 cards or 7 cards? It's like, they don't track really very well how many people have redeemed how many free sandwiches and things like that, because it's a little tricky in the old world, and newer loyalty programs get there. But again, they're pretty closed networks, where the Web3 ones would enable, and again, picking a simple use case, Web3 ones would allow us to sort of expand that and track that, you know, across companies, across projects. So Starbucks could go out and give a reward to people that have claimed 5 free sandwiches, and sort of incentivize people from the Subway loyalty program to join the Starbucks one. So Starbucks Odyssey launched today, which is their sort of initial steps into Web3. And it's super interesting, right? Like, one of the most powerful loyalty and sort of, quite frankly, economic driving value for Starbucks. Like, everybody's walking around who uses Starbucks with $20, $30, $10 in their Starbucks sort of card right on my phone, in my wallet. And now they're able to allow these points, and we'll see how that works, whether they're tradable and what the redemptions are. But I do think that as you talk to like chief marketing officers and some of the investors in Dust Labs, one of their theses is exactly that this becomes a new, much more engaged and much more trackable way to sort of reward the people that have spent the most on your business, that mean the most to your business, that have attended the most events that matter to your business. And it's not just about how much product they've purchased, but it could be really about how much engagement are they really having with your product or your company.
I mean, listen, you get the damn air horn. That was quite brilliant and succinct and compelling. And you know what? It's very consistent with what I wrote in Flip the Funnel, my third book in 2010. And I basically said, your customer is not just valuable based on how much money they spent, but based on how long they've been a customer and how active they are and which conversations they join and how much content they create and how many referrals. And guess what? Web3 is the one ring to rule them all. It brings everything and unifies them together. And I just love the way that you brought that together. Okay, now I don't think the POAP worked, but we keep trying and we'll figure it out, and I'll send another one to you and to the community. What makes you succeed? I mean, there are many companies out there that are creating community, that are creating projects that have bold visions and roadmaps. How the hell does DeGods become the #1 collection on Solana and one of the leading projects on the whole Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with a big vision, right? And Frank's been saying this the whole time. Like, the goal is to build the best NFT project, the best art, and the best community on the blockchain. And I think so. Those early days, I think where we were going was clear. I think what was not clear was like how to get there. And I think as you looked at where the community is at today, it was through lots of trial and error, right? And the team did a multitude of different things to tried things didn't work, they rolled them back. They had this very aggressive tax if you sold below the floor that would tax you 33% royalty fees if you sold lower than you purchased it for below the floor. But that sort of negative incentive didn't work. Tried to build like a medium-like competitor with like really sponsored content and people putting out like really interesting like training articles around Web3. Didn't really work. Things around events worked, things around merch worked, things around honest conversations in the Discord or on Spaces and connecting with community worked. I think supporting each other as we all went to build in the space worked. And I think the future of where DeGods is and the view that we have going forward is much around the reason that it was successful in the past. It was like whenever you would achieve something, whether it was like a release, a new event, some item on the roadmap, you always were like, what is next? What else are we doing? And like, it was never like, hey, we're just going to go here and then we're done. Like this notion of never being done and constantly pivoting and experimenting and looking for new ways. And the ethos of and the kind of community that was like, that's exciting, right? And there's something that's, passionate about how do you keep moving forward. And I think a lot of that continues to be, as we've built today, what can we do next? What's the next thing? And we're not 100% sure that will work, but we're very sure that if it doesn't, we'll try again. And if it does, we'll double down on it, right? And so I think about that notion of experimentation, that sort of unfettered sort of belief that like, no matter how low the floor price was or how bad or how the, projects were fudding us or there was negativity on, in the timeline on Twitter or whatever medium was possible, it was that we showed up to work every day, right? And back then we didn't call it feed the pigs, but that's what we did, right? The team woke up, the team looked at things and tried to build things. Frank was unapologetic on Twitter and saying, hey, like, we're not sure, what is the next thing? How can we get after it? And I think each step along those ways really allowed us to learn what the community wanted and then listening. Like one of the craziest things was in the early days of Discord, there was all these people coming in and saying, this is terrible. This project's a disaster. This isn't going to work. And Frank said, why don't we bring those really loud, strong voices in and make them community moderators? Like literally flip the script and just said, I'm going to bring in the most negative, the loudest voices to be in the community and make them, you know, on our team. Like let's hire them, right? And it was amazing, right? And it sort of allowed them to sort of feel that their feedback was heard at a massive level, but also we made a bunch of changes, right? And I think that that view of bringing them close has been something that Frank still does today. People go out on Twitter and say, this isn't working, or this isn't, you know, something we support. Frank's like, let's jump on Spaces. Let's just jump on a live stream and discuss it. And it's pretty amazing, right? Because when you get into that discussion, the nuances of like, we were talking past each other in text and 140 characters goes away. And it becomes a much more, you know, emotional and human connection to sort of find that in reality, we all kind of want the same thing. We want Web3 to work. We're not hanging out betting against Web3. If you want to do that, go do that somewhere else, right? And so I think the beauty of that is that, you know, the what we think success is doesn't mean other people have to lose. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Like our view is much more, you know, grow the pie, right? Like how do we grow 100x and then 1000x? And as Web3 expands, that truly is where we expect everyone to sort of rise all boats. And that is really the piece that when we think about the future, it's about, you know, what can we do to not only help ourselves, which is why we built Dust Labs, to go help others. Because we know that the software that we built is great for us. It's worked really well. It's driven us to be the top 2 projects. There are 3 if you include Tubes, which is the Mint Tube for Utes. But if we give that to others and help them also rise, like we'll all kind of raise up together as sort of a total, you know, sort of overall community.
Amen. And Isna is here, and Isna said, grow the pie. You know, Watership Down, you've read the book, you've seen the movie, you've bought the t-shirt, now eat the pie, so to speak. This was great, Kevin. And I really, really went back to the key phrase, which is feed those pigs, because you know, you feed the pigs when times are tough, and you feed the pigs when times are great.
Yeah.
When you have a victory, celebrate it for a moment and then go feed the pigs, because the pigs don't care. And when times are tough, feed the pigs, because again, the pigs don't care. I think for people paying attention, that's a huge, huge insight. And it's something that I hope people take away with them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And to us, like when we think about, you know, and we have, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 10 different things we're working on or we have in our mind, and we're okay. Like we you know, that we released this thing NFT Blue a couple of days ago that we built a few weeks ago, actually. That was like, hey, let's just create a social sort of push towards bringing royalties back in a social contract way. And we knew it wouldn't fix royalties because it's more of a social thing, but it would spur conversation. And sure enough, some of the best spaces we've had around discussing the future of royalties and enforcement and standards happened over the last 24 hours or 48 hours since we released that, because it really brought to light and got people talking and understands like what are their differences of opinions and where are people coming from, and you know, how can we sort of drive that together, because in the end, all of these project founders, company founders agree that the goal is to like, we have to grow the pie. We have to like get away from this scarcity mindset that the only way I can win is my project wins if your project doesn't win. And like, that's not really true, right? Like this is so early and it's such a nascent space that there is a decade or more ahead of us of sort of discovery of what are the right use cases, what are the real sort of attention things. And look, NFTs has been incredible because for the last, you know, 12 to 18 months, that has been the most visible thing of the blockchain, right? Like, yeah, there's crypto and there's coins and numbers go up, but what people see is the art and the pictures, but what they sometimes don't see, at least from the outside, is the level of community and the level of connection that people inside of this community are building. And that's what makes us excited. There's just so many companies, both inside of the portfolios of our investors, but also just broadly across Twitter, that are building across many different blockchains and taking sometimes different approaches, right? And sometimes those will conflict, but I do think that's how innovation happens, right? Like we have to take chances, we have to make a bet, and if those don't work out, then we're going to have to, you know, make a change. And our view is very experimentation driven. Both Frank and I come from that mindset of like startups and experimenting and knowing that you're not betting the farm on any one feature or any
betting
one
the pig farm.
product. Yeah, you're not betting the pig farm, because that is the thing, and the other one my dad always talked about was like profits are like breathing. Like if you don't have profits, eventually you stop breathing. If you stop breathing, you die. And a lot of companies, they run out of money, but they run out of money after they run out of passion and run out of time. Like they just, they just don't have the energy to kind of move on. And for us, we talk to the team and the community a lot about like, look, our goal every day is to make that 1% improvement, to find one thing better that we did today that we didn't do yesterday. And if we keep running that play 365 days a year, there'll be 365 new ideas that we've come up with and we've shipped. And so for us, it's really that notion of like, how do we sort of small additive sort of additions every day, and not trying to solve or find like a big bang, like, hey, we did it and it's solved in one shot. Like that, those are just lower probability of success. And they also make you feel bad because you're like, oh, I did it. And I'm going to do this thing that's going to change the world. And I get to the end, and then you're like, I finished and I didn't change the world or didn't make the difference. You sort of lose that energy to go on. And so for us, it's really about, realizing that everything we take is a shot on goal. And as long as we have the opportunity to still take more shots on goal, we're good. And we're going to keep building. And, we just believe that in the next decade, the market's going to get bigger, but also that the use cases and a lot of the technology just hasn't been figured out yet. Because again, go back 18 months ago, none of this really existed, right? The NFTs were nowhere where they were today. None of the applications were there today. And so it's really just about those small improvements every day that when you look back over 18 months, you're like, holy moly, like DeGods and Utes came out of nowhere. And you're like, yeah, nowhere, but like many hours of many hard days, and many days where that, and Frank's amazing at this. He'll pull back tweets or threads from a year ago or 8-10 months ago and be like, man, look at this thing we were thinking about. Like, how wrong were we, or how right were we? But, just the naivety of like reading back that and knowing all the things we didn't know. And so I think to me, that's the excitement of like,
oh man, the crowd will just not leave you alone. I was looking up and I was like, you know what, this feels like a little bit of an MBA course, because I was like, the concept of and I looked it up, Kaizen, right?
Yeah.
Kaizen, the Japanese practice of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
But then combined with this idea of that beautiful saying, an overnight success, 20 years in the making. That's why I wanted to emphasize your past, your track record. And you know what? Even if we look at Frank before doxxed, after doxxed, appearances may be deceiving.
Yeah.
This, wild and crazy guy, but at the end of the day, two people that came together with a common passion and a shared purpose, and what you've done is created something that can sustain. I hope people are, looking up and paying attention. Isna says, innovation is adopted by leaders of resiliency and consistency, but really just people that know how to feed those pigs. So I love everything that you shared there. Kevin, I want to talk about the doxing.
Yeah.
What was life, I guess, BD and then AD, before doxxed and after doxxed? What was your life like before? And then talk about the actual doxing. And in keeping with the pigs, this was your coming out.
GM, everybody, got to feed those pigs. Yeah, so that was the moment that we posted it. I think, look, I was always intending to dox. Like I was a pretty public person before, starting to work with Frank and the team here this summer. But like the notion of sort of the anonymity of being able to just be this sort of like, JPEG online was sort of cool, right? Because you got to play a little bit of a different character, and people could be more negative and more positive to the character than they probably would to the human. And so it allowed us to sort of like, oh, that's Kevin's like crypto world. And then that's like Kevin comes home and it's normal. And Frank, to the same extent, he's like, people didn't judge him by his age, his background, his ethnicity. Like he's just Frank. And that was this sort of like somewhat mythical, but also somewhat allowed him to provide separation in his own personal life. And I mean, now you've seen it, you know, Frank as a young teenager doing TED Talks and his starting his businesses and dropping out of school at UCLA to come work on his last startup. Like pretty incredible, right? Like what, you know, for how young he is, for what he's achieved. So for us, it was always like, hey, I was going to dox. You know, people knew that I was going to be on filings that when we were, you know, creating the different entities, and you know, joining the team, like that was part of the plan, that I would, you know, eventually be doxed. With Frank, it was kind of like eventually would happen. We know this happened with Yuga when they raised money and sort of became public. Both their founders became, you know, doxed shortly thereafter. So when we woke up that morning and we were seeing more and more threads of people somewhat threatening, you know, saying, hey, if you don't dox or this, or, you know, we're going to out these things, and, you know, finding my Wikipedia and saying, we think that's you. And here's my LinkedIn. And people are sending me DMs saying, oh, we're pretty sure this is Frank. And they found a video from here. And so we, you know, we had rumblings of this for a few months. But, you know, it finally became clear that there was some subset of people that were very interested in having this discussion. And so we said, look, you know, we're going to go to bed. We're going to wake up in the morning and we're going to look at our, Discord internal in the team and Twitter accounts and see what people are saying. And if it's the discussion about us and linking to all our videos, then let's just do it. And so Frank's like, you know, he recorded his video GM and I did mine. And, I was already in Miami in Art Basel. And so for me, it was kind of cool. Like I literally walked into the hotel one night as Kevin DeGods, and, you know, nobody said anything to me. And I walked down the lobby the next morning and 4 people walked right up to me like, whoa, you're Kevin DeGods. And then, you know, events and throughout the week at Art Basel, both Frank and I were, you know, more recognizable than ever. And, you know, you could walk up to people, whether it was an event or whatever, and they knew you. And it was kind of nice because it was never this awkward thing of like, you know, what did you do before, you know, Dust Labs? And I'd be like, well, I worked for a logistics company. And, you know, like you would always explain things. You'd have to like try to be descriptive of what you were doing without doxing yourself and making it too easy. Now it's simple. I'm like, yeah, I worked here, I worked there. And it's pretty straightforward. And it actually, at some level, it's freeing, right? Because I'm just back to being me, which is who I was, several months before. And so, yeah, it's been an incredibly positive experience. I think, you know, people were sort of posturizing that, oh, if Kevin or Frank ever get doxed or they figure out who the team is, you know, that will be the end of the project. And they'll realize that these guys are jokers or they're not in to stay. And it's like quite the opposite. You know, we doxed and they're like, oh, wow, these guys both have pretty incredible track records. They've been working.
Feed the pigs.
Yeah, got to feed the pigs. And so we went back to work and had a day of distraction of, you know, sort of, you know, doxing discussion, as we would say, and jumping on spaces and things of that nature to sort of like commentate on the activities. But went back to work. And for us, it's been great. And like I said, there's been a super positive reception and, business is normal, right? We're back to work. And now I can do interviews like this. If you look at my past ones, I'd wear like a mask or a hoodie, and Frank would too. And I had this, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean bandana that I got on a Disney cruise with my family from, you know, in October. And Frank had a Bitcoin mask, but now we sort of retired it.
We should have planned a mask and then an unmasking as well. You know what I love about the story, Kevin, is that in many respects you can be hiding in plain sight, and you can be a good guy or you can be a bad guy, right? There are people. I mean, look at what's going on with FTX, etc. You can absolutely be of flesh and blood and not exactly be a savory character, but you can also be an avatar and be a good guy. And I think even though you did have a superpower of being invisible, walking amongst us, you know, us mortals, and being able to get away with it, although the voice probably sometimes gave you away. You're like, wait, have we not met before? But I do think that there is power in anonymity. That was the original power of social media that was then butchered and bastardized by trolls and fakes and so on and so forth. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, our integrity, our reputation should speak for us. So I love the fact that you told us that story and how now it's back to work. In the time we have left, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the projects. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to not that one, but this one. There are two links. Very minimalist. Which one would you like to click on first?
You can click. I mean, the scholarships is the one we're selling today. I think the proof of work is a sort of I'll just give a quick rundown of that one. Just a really cool idea that we came up with to show the team that we were working. It's sort of an homage to the Feed the Pigs. We do something every day, and we stopped updating it because it was super manual on the back end, and we also didn't want to leak what was happening leading up to the Utes relaunch. We still have all the data internally. We're just not publishing it. We're actually working on a new version of this, which will be pretty exciting because it'll make it easier for us to update. But more importantly, we're going to allow the community to update. Because again, proof of work for DeGods or for Utes or for even Dust Labs at this point is not really about the small number of people that are on the team, relatively speaking. It's about how can people contribute, right? And so that one is a product that we've got a large interest list of folks to sort of access it in our beta. We've not released it yet other than our own, partly because we really want to make another rev on it that just makes it better, because we've also found that it's a little laborious the way it is today.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about Utes and specifically this idea of scholarships.
Yeah, so when we were starting Utes, we had spent at the time probably, I don't know, I think DeGods were 6, 7, 8 months old at that point, and it had been a really hard and day-to-day sort of work to really build the right community, right? Through doing the right thing, finding people that connected with what we were doing. And we said, wouldn't it be cool to create a collection that wasn't just given out, to the most loudest voices, or wasn't just, a random who could click the first or the fastest. And we said, what if we created like a college application to apply to be in our new collection, right? And so we came up with this idea of scholarships, which was relatively simple. It's basically you connect your wallet, you connect a Twitter account, you answer a few questions about yourself. And then, it allowed us as a team to sort of better curate the people that were going to have that early access, right? We always knew once the community was out and running, look, it's going to be a free market. People can buy in and sell in. But the idea of at least having a hand, and we accepted people with millions of followers that had very large voices, that many of them were not in Web3, like Wayne Rooney, we also accepted people with like less than 20 followers that had like a really impressive background that just aren't active on Twitter, right? And so we never would have found folks without getting to have like more of a sort of open and inclusive process to just meet new people. And the idea was that, hey, we did that for Utes. So when Utes started, literally the day that Utes minted, we instantly had clubs forming and people forming into social norms. And it was just this incredible sort of like sub DAOs or clubs building themselves out, and the community being incredibly like active on Discord, talking about their breakfast and what they're having, and like a very different, but a very much more well-rounded community than I think what it initially started with DeGods, that took time to get to that sort of like well-rounded group that we have today. And for us, like that model really made a big difference, right? And so what we decided was, hey, again, the idea of Dust Labs is when we build something that works really well for us. We had 70,000 people apply for a Ute list, and there was 3,000 spots. And so, it was heavily oversubscribed, which became a challenge. We had to add a bunch of features to deal with that level of scale. At the end, I think people were, disappointed, because you can imagine 67,000 people were told that they didn't qualify. It was actually more exclusive to get into Ute list than it was to get into Harvard this year. And, that's not by any, it's just hard, right? And you're going to have people being disappointed. Now, we've added some new features into the current version that's selling, that projects are rolling out. And projects have used this to bootstrap their gaming community. Like Honeyland was one of the first ones the first one to launch. We've had ASICs use it for a collaboration with us and Solana at Breakpoint. When they sold their shoe, they flowed people into scholarships to learn more about their customers and give them additional airdrops. And so we're already seeing pretty varied use cases of it. But the idea is really like, can you connect crypto sort of wallet information with sort of Twitter information or Discord, or both, if that's your mind, plus this notion of some free form questions that matter to what you want to learn about your community. And then finally, this sort of viral aspect of, as people are accepted, it gets notified out to Twitter or Discord, depending on how you configure it, so that people can sort of celebrate the people coming into the community. So pretty like, small set of initial features, but those wound together in that product has been incredibly valuable for, us building Utes. And we've seen that in the first 10 to 15 customers that have launched from Dust Labs.
In the time we have left, I really want to ask you one main question, which is to talk about what it's going to take to essentially onboard the next billion wallets. But first, just a simple reflection. There is a minimalist approach to your website, to the links, that proof of work, etc. Because most of the presence is spent on doing the work, right? Feeding the pigs, but also in this tremendous commitment to Twitter Spaces and to the conversation and ultimately the community. And I hope people see that and take that away, that instead of creating big, flashy, obtuse websites and tremendous amounts of content, what you really are doing is investing in community and conversation, two different C's. And I think that is a huge departure from maybe what came before. Would you agree with that statement?
I would. And I think it is something that, Frank is a master of like both the attention economy of like that sense of like, getting people excited and getting people into a conversation, whether it's spaces or, a really viral Twitter thread. And we design, quite frankly, most of the things we build with that in mind. We write the tweet first and say, hey, this is a tweet. It's going to go viral. Now let's work back and build the product to make that possible. And the idea of keeping it simple and minimal is, we think, one of the things to just lower the friction, right? There's still way too much friction to use Web3 and set up wallets and configure things, where we believe that to get to that sort of, billion mark of like people in Web3, it's going to require something that is much more natural that people do already. It's going to need to come to them. It's going to need to be mobile. It's going to need to be on the phone. It's going to not require a bunch of special apps to go through and do it. You're going to just want that flow to be very clean. It's going to come to you versus you having to go to it. And so a lot of what we do is just trying to simplify it, right? I mean, I always joke, like 85% of what we build looks like Web 2. It's a website, a database, and some hosting. 10% connects the wallet. Maybe 5% connects the wallet and 10% interacts with the blockchain. Our view is that needs to get down to like, almost 0% on the edges, right? Where it's like, hey, the thing you interact with is just like you would use a website, just like I would pick up any app on my phone. It just sort of acts with me, or it's in my trackers, right? Like I've got, these, my fitness tracker or my watch sort of automatically, interacting with whatever Web3 thing needs to matter, whether that's tracking my points or tracking my steps in a way that can get me rewarded, like in a Stepin type thing. Like Stepin was a great example, right? Very simple app, moved to invisible. Yeah. You didn't notice that Web3 was back there. They created more Solana wallets than anyone else in the early days because nobody knew that that's what's happening. It was just behind the scenes. I think Teleport's another one I'm super excited about. They're building sort of the ride sharing for Web3. We got to use their cars in Miami. I also was able to try them in Lisbon. Pretty cool, right? Like the idea that you've now decentralized what could be the ride sharing or sort of like sharing economy in a really direct creator to consumer type model. Pretty cool, right? And you're not going to know that you're building a wallet or that the blockchain is even part of that.
I always say that, no one ever comes home from a concert saying, man, the reverb was unbelievable tonight. That graphic equalizer was just perfect. Generally, the only time they'll talk about the sound is when it sucks. Yeah. And so it is one of those seen but not heard type of things. Yeah. All right. So in literally the last 2 or 3 minutes, we've got, if we want to grow the next billion wallets and onboard those wallets and bring in the next $1 billion, if we want the big brands to come in, and yeah, we've got the Starbuckses and the Porsches and the Nikes, but there are a lot more that we need. There is almost this PTSD, or maybe it's BPT, brand post-traumatic stress disorder, that it's the .com boom and bust. It's the pets.com all over again. This saying crypto is the spam of Web3. They're burnt. They're worried about SBF and FTX. What do you say to brands right now that are got their noses up against the glass, that are on the outside looking in, that are nervous, that are scared, that don't want to be fired, that want to be promoted, that don't want to FOMO into early, but don't want to miss the boat again? What do you say to them?
Yeah, so it's something we think about a lot. And so I think one of our latest things is actually targeted just at that, because I think we've seen a lot of brands come in over the last year, and a lot of their projects or a lot of their entries in there look failed because they go up, they have a very low floor price, the project has no activity, it's sort of drifted off. And the idea of them making that sort of material like on the blockchain commitment is hard to unwind. It's hard. You can't just be like, oh, I want to delete that thing off the blockchain. It's not really possible. And so and we've heard that, right? We've talked to these brands and we said, look, there's a better way, right? And I think the way that we've exposed and we've thought about this is for DeGods and Utes, we've launched staking, which allows you to sort of park your NFT to earn points. And then those points are redeemed in our reward center, which will open up around Christmas Day. And the idea of rewards is much like Chuck E. Cheese or the arcade, right? You earn points or tickets from the machine. You go into the back. They have all the cool toys, right? They have the big stuffy on the wall or the Xbox on the wall that's, 1 million points or 1 million tickets. And then they have a bunch of smaller things. And our view is that brands would love to be on the reward side or the activation side of Web3. And if they can do that in a way that says, hey, all I'm going to do is say, hey, if you use my app and go to a store, we'll give you a free burrito. Like, okay, very clean activation, drives the numbers that are not going to get them fired, that's going to get them promoted, which is, hey, they got people to install their app. They got people, to come to a store that they were opening or they wanted more foot traffic on. And they gave out a free burrito, which is something that was part of the economy that they exist. And if it doesn't work, they can pivot that and say, oh, no, it's going to get 3 free burritos. You're going to go to 4 stores if it's too easy, right? They can change the rules. Or we're going to give out this coupon, but it's only redeemable on these phases, right? Great. All those things are very simple and easy for the brand to activate. They look much like the marketing they do in Web 2. It doesn't require them to write anything to the blockchain, but they get to participate and sort of see it allows them to test utility, right? When you think of a lot of NFT projects, whether it's community, whether it's, rewards, NFTs generally have some community. It's the art, right? But there's generally some other reason. It's not just the art in many cases, right? And the idea is that brands all have lots of utility, but they're not sure which ones will hit best and which ones will work best in Web3. And so the idea of us building this reward center will allow brands to come in and test utility, interact with our Web3 audiences that are very passionate and very large, the 2 most popular being DeGods and Utes. And then, that sort of reward center model will be easy for brands to safely test. Hey, they get it working. Great. Now they can go launch a project. Maybe they can do an airdrop. Maybe they can actually go launch their own NFT because they've learned what utility works for their people and for their brand and their consumer. On the other side of that, we will take that software and allow existing NFT projects or existing Web3 founders to use that software to go and enable them to also work with brands in that sense. And if they don't have a bunch of strong brand partnerships, we have many, lots of brands have reached out to us and connected with us as we launch this. We can actually allow them to easily onboard those brands with like one click where it's like, hey, you also want to do the burrito offer. You also want to do the coupon offer. Great. You just sign up for it. You click here. You can get, the discount on the drinks or the discount on the new free samples or something like that. So a bunch of interesting things to come. Still deeply in the experimentation phase. But that's one of the things that excites me about how early we are here. And, as that happens, these brands will get comfortable. Each of these brands will build millions and then tens of millions. And I think that's how we ladder up to that billion number.
As Howard Stern would say at the end of a successful interview, he'd say, you've done it all, you've said it all. And Kevin, DeGods, you certainly have done it all. Not only successful founder and CEO, but now an author. So please look forward to Kevin's new book, Burrito Branding, available wherever good books are sold. I absolutely loved it. Burrito Branding. You are the man. So what have we learned today? I mean, we've learned everything today. Thank you for joining and for becoming a part of Alpha Collective. Together, we will be the rising tide that floats all boats. We will onboard the next billion wallets and $1 billion. I want to just say this offer applies. If you want to see Kevin as part of this Alpha Collective, all you have to do is the minute this floor is swept, I'm sending a full pass to you to give away. All we have to do is basically see not one of these being listed, all of them bought. It's cheap. And you know what? It's simple and it's succinct and it's frictionless as well. So just a little bit of an offer to this wonderful community. I cannot wait. I cannot wait until I am shoeing with you, until I'm buying into this amazing, amazing community. Can I still go and apply for a scholarship, by the way?
Scholarships are closed. That was for the Mint, unfortunately. So no more scholarships. But there's if you come to the Discord, there's a lot of scholarship projects launching, and so there's a bunch of new ones out there every week as our customers are launching it. And so not there yet, but awesome. I really appreciate you having me on, Joseph. This was really incredible to spend the hour with you.
It was great. And the last thing before we go is we have a quote. This is the quote I found for you, Kevin. Nice. I'm proud to be called a pig. It stands for pride, integrity, and guts. And this was said by Ronald Wilson Reagan. Thank you so much. And you know what? One more person that will be buying into the collection soon will be Chuck Norris.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.